Now for our news panel. After threatening to veto 700 bills unless lawmakers make a deal on water, Governor Schwarzenegger signed over 400 bills at the last minute. Jill Tucker, education writer with the San Francisco Chronicle, is here to tell us about some of the bills in education. Scott Schaefer, host of the California Report on KQED Public Radio, reports on those that impact the LGBT community. And labor writer Dick Meister has details on the bills relating to labor. So Jill Tucker, let's begin with you. What are some of the bills the governor signed that might impact education, that will impact education?
Well, probably the biggest bills that people were talking about were the bills that affect this funding coming out of Washington, D.C., the race to the top money. It's $4.35 billion with a B, which is a lot of money, and California wants a big chunk of that. But there were some things in our education code that restricted California's ability to get that. And the one that especially SB 19 was linking data, test data, with teachers. And the race to the top money from the Obama administration says you need to be able to do that. And there was some debate, and the teachers union was weighing in. The governor called a special session to deal with this issue at the last minute, and they got this bill through and he signed it. There were a few other bills that dealt with race to the top money because the rest of the bills that were out there for education did not have any money coming to education. So that was definitely a trend in the 65 bills that he signed out of 105 total. Not a lot of money for schools in there.
Okay, so that was not a bill that teachers necessarily would have supported, right?
No, the union was not terribly fond of that. They don't like the idea of linking test data to individual teachers. They think it's a little unfair. And yet they basically could do that anyway. So this tweaking of the education code just makes it very clear that it's possible to do it. Schools were doing it anyway to help the kids. But it was something that now really paves the way for California to compete with that. And Governor Schwarzenegger was adamant that we needed to do this.
Given that there's no money in the state budget for much of anything, are any of these education bills, are they mostly feel-good bills, or might something actually happen in the classroom that's going to make our schools more efficient, perform better?
Well, when you look at a lot of the bills, like any of the bills that we're going to be talking about tonight, a lot of them are tweaking codes where they weren't working somehow or other. He was really focused on a few things. He loves his digital textbooks initiative where I don't know how the kids are actually going to read these necessarily in the classroom for a while unless they all get Kindles, which would cost some money. But he did things like that kind of set the stage for maybe policy in the future. He's fond of charter schools. He did a few things that helps them get buildings more easily. But really, when it came to serious reform, he vetoed a lot of bills that would have led the way for serious reform in California, including education finance. There was one bill that a lot of folks were up in arms that he didn't sign that would created a working group to really take on how we fund schools in California. It's something that people have wanted to do, and no one's taken the initiative. And he was criticized for vetoing something that would have set that in motion. He said it wasn't necessary, we could do it anyway, but he hasn't provided the leadership to get it going.
You know, he still has, what, a year plus left in his term, but already people are talking about his legacy, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, does he have a legacy in education, would you say? And if so, like, how does this session of bills that he signed add to it or take away from it?
Well, I don't think this session necessarily adds to it. He's basically known in the education community for cutting education. And so far, that's his legacy, is an era of serious and dramatic cuts to schools and not really doing anything to backfill that.
Going forward, how are people in the educational community, how are they feeling about the future? I know that the math scores were down. There's even talk that there may be other cuts coming down the road. What's the mood?
The mood is not good because they have had so many cuts. Class sizes are already growing, and we're talking about massive budget shortfalls next year. San Francisco, for example, is talking about a $60 million budget shortfall just in San Francisco, which would mean massive layoffs, larger class sizes, and they're not seeing anything on the radar coming from the governor or the legislature that is going to help them. So the mood is not happy in education, and nothing here. There's, like I said, some tweaking that schools are wanted and that will help them, but nothing that's really going to alleviate the problems.
And going up beyond K through 12, you've got community colleges, UC, the CSU system struggling also. Is there anything coming from in the way of stimulus money that could help, say, the community colleges with retraining people? There's so many people unemployed, losing jobs, trying to transition into some other kind of career. Is any help for them?
Well, I think a lot of people in education, higher ed and K-12 are saying thank goodness for the stimulus, because it really has helped them maintain programs like that through the recession, save jobs. They were talking about how many jobs were saved in California, 28,000 plus, because of the stimulus money. So yeah, it's really making a difference, but that's going away.
Yeah.
In the bills, though, that the governor did sign in education, there was at least one indication of his new thoughts when he looked at the bills that were of interest to the gay community, because I think the bill concerning the one day that was most important to our local representative, Senator Mark Leno.
Yeah, he had a couple of bills that were signed by the governor this time. One that he vetoed last year, a bill that will set aside a day of recognition for Harvey Milk, the former San Francisco supervisor, the first openly elected gay official in the country. Of course, he was killed in 1979. This is a day of recognition. It's not a holiday, but he joins John Muir, the California Poppy, and teachers as having their own day of recognition in California. I think Harvey would probably get a chuckle out of that pairing, or that those four people, four groups being together. But it's not without controversy. He did veto it last year, he said, because it should be a local celebration here in the Bay Area. But of course, the former actor was convinced by the movie Milk, which got a lot of play nationally, won an Academy Award, and he said that his visibility had been raised by that movie, and that now he was a statewide figure that worthy of this day of recognition.
So the popularity that the public accepted this film as something that was valuable enough to spend their money on might have had a little impact?
Well, that was actually part of his statement. When he signed the bill, he acknowledged that. The other thing he signed, which in some ways, both that bill and this other bill that he signed, SB 54, another Mark Leno bill, which will recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states when these couples moved to California, if those marriages were performed before Prop 8 passed, and then couples that get married in states like Massachusetts and move here after Prop 8 passed, those unions will be recognized in the same way with the same level of legal protections as they would have gotten in the states they came from. So it's kind of a backdoor. Opponents of that would say it's kind of a backdoor undoing of Prop 8.
It was interesting, Scott, because the governor reversed his decision on the Harvey Milk Day, and he's surprised, I think, the LGBT community with these signatures. What's interesting, and I've been seeing it with the Harvey Milk Day already in the education community, is that it's already, these two bills are stirring up a hornet's nest with the opposition, or the Prop 8 people that we had that are still out there. They're already calling for a boycott of Harvey Milk Day, which is not until May. How much backlash has the governor got on this?
Well, this is really a stick in the eye of the base of the Republican Party. I mean, if there was any relationship left between him and the conservatives in the party, this pretty much puts the nail in the coffin. This is a clear signal that I think this is in some ways Arnold Schwarzenegger unplugged. This is really what he's doing now in the final months. He's not running for re-election. He says he's not running for another office. So the things he's doing are, things that he probably believes to be.
Finally seeing the real Arnie.
Well, at least this version of 2009. But you're right. It does stir up a hornet's nest, and it could lead to another ballot measure of some kind. You never know in California what that hostility can lead to.
We're already headed to court. I mean, there has been a case accepted in the court.
There's a case in federal court which is making its way through. The trial is scheduled to begin on January 11th. There were efforts to get it tossed out. That was rejected this week by the judge, Vaughn Walker. And so a lot is happening. They're trying to have Prop 8 thrown out as being unconstitutional with the federal Constitution, equal protection, and so that one is moving along. So all those things really infuriating people. I think the schools were really a big part of the Prop 8 campaign. This concern that gay rights was going to make its way into the schools and be part of the curriculum if gay couples were allowed to marry in California.
And that's why I was thinking it was somewhat ironic that the celebration in the gay community for Harvey Milk Day is actually reinforcing some of those same things within the opposition. and basically bringing those folks together again, to solidifying that
It really
once
does.
again.
I mean, to keep in mind, it's only schools are encouraged to have the students talk about Harvey Milk and his legacy. They're not required to do it, but you know,
And they
nonetheless.
often don't talk about poppies on Poppy Day.
Don't
so
talk about poppies.
So actually, people can choose not to do this. So do you think there will still be a lawsuit or some other action?
I don't know that there's, I think the action will be along the lines of what Jill is describing, that parents may organize and just, you know, particularly in more conservative parts of the state, have an opt-out sort of option for students and their families so that they don't have to be required to be in a classroom where they're talking about Harvey Milk and his legacy.
Well, you know, moving to another topic where there were some surprises, labor has not been considered, as with those bills that he had vetoed, the governor had vetoed in prior years, a real friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but yet he signed some bills they were interested in this time.
Yes, it was very unusual because he and all the Republicans in Sacramento are not exactly friends of labor, but he did sign some important bills. I mean, workers' compensation, for instance. I think there were 2 or 3 really important bills. A lot of employers, too many of them, cheat their workers by not taking out workers' compensation, not joining the system. So a worker gets hurt on the job, can't work, is supposed to get a benefit, no benefit because the employer wasn't enrolled. So they put in a bill that really tightly regulates and supposedly is going to stop that. And the other one that's important, I think, is that to get your benefit, you have to be certified, a doctor has to certify this person was hurt on the job and should get this amount of benefit. Well, a lot of employers say, oh yeah, tell their workers, you got hurt, you better go see a doctor and get your benefits. Well, they send them to a company doctor, the employer's doctor, not, and surprise, the employer's doctor somehow says, in a lot of cases, you're asking for too much, Mr. Worker. You know, you weren't really hurt that bad, and I'll certify that you should get a little benefit, but not a lot. And that sort of thing is stopped.
These are things, though, that the labor community has been complaining about for years. I remember, you know, writing about these things several years ago.
Yeah.
Why is Schwarzenegger now saying, oh, now is the time to sign these bills? What did he say in his signing messages for saying, oh, now this is important?
No, I don't think he indicated that why it would be at this particular time. Maybe he's always felt that way, and now, as you mentioned in other regard, he's going out and he'll just say, well, I want to do this now.
It basically gets them to follow the law, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's really
it's not
what it
like
amounts to.
some big
No, it's not a
new,
great big overhaul, but
Was
it's,
there a signal from Washington that might have made him feel more friendly toward these particular bills, or toward
No,
labor, or what?
no, I don't think so. No.
You don't think so?
No, he's your typical anti-labor Republican. I mean, that's what it amounts to. But he made some exceptions in signing these bills, and he vetoed some bills, though, that should have gone through that would have helped labor, but that's another matter.
Okay. Well, Governor Schwarzenegger speaking out, signing things that he vetoed before, helping education where it didn't cost any money, and giving labor at least enough to send out an email to say he signed our bills. So, thank you, Jill, Scott, and Dick.